Hey y'all, welcome to another fun interview, and I have Michael here. Hey Michael,
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for coming to talk to me about you, your books, and everything you do to get there.
Happy to do it. Thank you for the invitation.
So no super hard questions, but one of the first things I like to ask is how did you decide that you wanted to write and write horror? Because there's so many genres.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I've always sort of wanted to do this since I was in high school. When I first went to college, I was a journalism and creative writing major, but I quickly talked myself right out of that and did something entirely different. And I think it was just prior to the pandemic, a friend of mine, Benjamin Chandler, was writing and putting things on Amazon. And I've known him for 30 years, and he's like, "Why aren't you doing this?" And so he really encouraged me. He's who I've dedicated my book to. I would never have done this without him. And so he got me going. And the funny thing about the horror angle was, I didn't really have a plan here. I just started writing what I was interested in. And my first book, so I got a couple of short stories out, but my first book I got out, Sanctuary, I thought I was writing a romance story. And little did I know, when people read it, they talked about, the creeping sense of horror, how scary it was, all these other things. And I thought, wow, I'm a really terrible romance writer. I will never do that again. So there we go. Apparently, I can't
Oh,
help myself.
oh my goodness. What kind of books kind of got you into that? Were you more of a kid that was reading horror or were you watching it?
Oh, yeah, I probably was more watching it. I read a lot more like science fiction and fantasy. I wasn't, although I will say the one thing that really crossed over for me was Clive Barker, because I feel like his stuff really straddles both in a really interesting way, and I still really enjoy his work. But yeah, definitely I was, reading some sort of science fiction book, and then I would watch Friday the 13th, or I can't tell you how many times I've seen probably the first and third Nightmare on Elm Street movies and like stuff like that, just constant. Hellraiser, all that stuff. It was just what I was into. I never really thought about any of that as being separate from anything else.
Interesting. Where do you think your inspiration comes from when you are writing? Are you one of those people, it's like you see an idea and you think, oh, how could this go horribly wrong? Or is it more just you're feeding off the things around you type situation?
Yeah, I tend to like react a lot. Like I'll see things and be like, "Oh, I wish it was like this." And my poor wife has had to for years suffer listening to me on the couch watching TV being like, that would be so much better if they had done XYZ at the end of that or in the middle of that or whatever. And she's very patient and very tolerant. But I think part of the reason I started writing was to spare her all of these observations about what would have made a better thing and actually do something about it.
That's a pretty good idea though, because I know I'll be watching something or I'll read something and maybe I didn't like how it ended and I'm like, man, you know what? I wish it would have been this or that. That's a good way to channel that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually sort of like things that fail. Like if you watch a thing and it just sort of tanks, like you learn a lot from that, right? Like, oh, that sucked really bad. And then if you think about it, like, why was that terrible? And then like you sort of go back to it and think I could probably have made that better. So I have several friends and we love watching terrible movies, in part because they're hilarious and fun. But it's also kind of funny to learn like, how tone deaf people can be about certain things. And you think to yourself, making a movie takes a lot of people. Like, how did someone not read that script? How did somebody not say that scene doesn't work? And so you think to yourself, maybe I would have done that different. And I don't make movies, so I don't know. Maybe there's good reasons for that, but there it is.
No, that's interesting. Do you plan out your books? Are you an outliner or you just start writing it and you just go where you go?
So it depends. So this is the whole like pantsers versus planners thing, right? And I've
Yeah.
watched and listened a whole bunch about this. And I'd love to say that I fall really solidly into one or the other. I think I'm like the worst of both worlds in that like I start sort of pantsing it out like with Twist of Cain. It really was I had this idea standing at the kitchen counter in my mom's house while I was visiting her for the 4th of July. And I was like, oh man, that's really good. And so I just sat down with no plan and started writing it, right? And it sort of turned into this short story about 14,000 words. And I was like, that's good. But then I had the terrible thought that could be a lot more. And so then I had to go plan over the thing that I'd sort of pantsed out. And that was kind of a mess. And so here I am years later, I got it all done. But like it leads to a lot of weird like inside out writing. Like I think the first line I wrote in Twist of Cain is actually on page 6 now, because I ended up later on adding pages to the front and all these other things to make things work better. So at the same time, I do have like a weird streak of totally planning things. Like Twist of Cain has it's all past tense, right? It's first person, someone telling you about something that's happened to them. But the problem with it is, as that character is telling you about things, he's telling you about moments in the past where he realized something in his past. So you end up like 2 layers in. And the chronology gets a little out of order. So I do actually, and this is sad to confess, I have a spreadsheet where I have every single day figured out in chronological order so that even though it's told out of order, I know what happened when, so I can keep track of it all.
I mean, it's not sad because it makes sense for you to be able to tell the story. Somebody has to know the order that it originally came in, you know?
Well, and if I'm going to be a big jerk and watch other people's movies or read their books and be critical, like it just makes me more critical about me. And so I'm like, yeah, that's terrible. Like, go fix that. That doesn't make sense, you know? So I try to. I mean, it's funny, one of the ARC readers that I sent out after, I mean, I think I've been working on this book over 5 years on and off. I left an I out of the word Miami. Like, how do you miss an I in Miami? How many times have I read that word? But there it is, and somebody else caught it. So I just, you try your best.
Oh. No, absolutely. That's so crazy. And that was about what I was about to ask is about how long it takes you. But how many times do you think that you have revised this over and over, just going at it until you were like, you know what? I think I'm ready for somebody else to actually look at this.
So I was curious about that, and my habit is I tend to save versions over time. So like when I finish one that I think is pretty solid, I'll like date it and save it. And then if I come back and do a revision, I'll open it and save it as another one. So it gives me a sense of like the chronology. So I went back and looked, and like from my first note that I saved in the folder for this until it comes out like in a week and a half, I think it's 5 years, 9 months, and 7 days is what I counted. And I don't spend all of my time doing that, right? Like I've written other things in the meantime. And so oftentimes what happens is, like with Twist of Cain, I did get it sold as a short story, but it no longer exists. The site that I sent it to is no longer in existence. And I thought I could do more with it. So like it kind of sat out there as a short story for a year and a half. And then I did a revision, and then I got a little help from a developmental editor. I sent it off to somebody and said, "What do you think?" And so then they're dealing with it for a while. And so I tend to work on other stuff while I'm waiting to hear back from folks. So I'm always writing. It's just not always the same thing. So like it's not really fair to say that I spent that much time on it, but like that is the beginning to the end for that.
Of course. Do you fight with yourself on killing characters? Are you ever like, okay, so this character's gotta die, but I hate killing them, or have second thoughts about it, or are you just like, nah, you gotta go?
It's funny. So I don't want to ruin anything, but if you go read the reviews for Sanctuary, you will see that people either love or hate the last chapter of that book. And I love it so much. Like when I wrote it, I thought, "Oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever done." Like the end. And there's literally one review on there where it's like, "I hate you for this chapter, but like I really like they like the book, but they hated that." And I won't say what happens, but I do find that there are times that I catch myself being kind of mean to my characters. So in The Maiden's Sleep, the main character Bo, I had this idea that it would be fun to write a fantasy book that was basically Chinatown. And like what I love about Chinatown, well, there's a lot of things I love about Chinatown, but it's how much Jack Nicholson gets messed up in that movie. Like by the end, he's just an embarrassment of like all of the stuff he's had to endure through that movie. And so in part of writing The Maiden Sleep, I got about three-fourths through and I thought, man, I'm being really mean to this guy. Like this is a really terrible set of circumstances and bad things that have happened to him. Um, but I justified it by saying, he's not real. So that's how it goes. I guess that's what playing God feels like.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny. I've asked this question a couple of times and I always think it's interesting to hear like did you have because it when I think about it, I would have to possibly argue about it, but I've talked to a couple of authors that are just like, well, it's time for him to go. And I'm like, oh, okay, you didn't struggle with that.
I
Like,
mean,
what am I?
I think
There's
it's all about story. I don't try and get precious about anything because in things that I love, if they kill off a character and it's better for the story overall, that's fine. I think there is a tendency, particularly in American media, of outstaying your welcome. Like the British are so good about being like, there are three seasons of this and it's the end, and too bad, go watch something else now, you know? And how many of us have watched a show where you're like, yeah, the first like five seasons are good, but boy, don't watch those last three because they're terrible. And then it just kind of ruins the whole thing.
too much of a good thing.
Yeah, and not enough shows have good endings. Like, I'd rather have a show just straight up end and be satisfied with that. Like, the in my opinion, one of the greatest endings of all time is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? The last episode of that show is so perfect, and it makes everything else about the preceding seasons perfect too. So every time they talk about bringing that show back, I'm like kind of happy because I'm a fan, but also kind of sad because I really, really don't want them to mess up what is essentially a great story.
So many of my favorite TV shows are sci-fi or horror ones that have gotten canceled, and I'm always semi excited when they talk about rebooting them, but I'm like, please don't ruin what we had.
I know. I'm so torn too because like you want to see these characters again and you want to know what happens. But at the same time, like there's a little bit of me that's like, can we make a little more room for new stuff? Like I understand the compulsion to like revisit, but it's also like if someone in the past hadn't invented these things out of nothing in the first place, we'd have nothing to revisit anyways. So
No, absolutely. It makes total sense. And that's a thing with a lot of books too, or book series even for that matter. Like you have a beloved character or this thing that you love so much, and then after book 17, you're like, okay, it's just the same thing all over again. I'm gonna go find something else.
yes, no book 17.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. How scary was it for you to get your book out to somebody that wasn't a close friend or somebody that knew you to look at it like eyes wise? Because I feel like I would want to throw up if I did that. I don't even like sending emails sometimes.
So, right, I think I don't want to put everybody in a bucket, but my sense is many writers are introverts. Like we huddle away in rooms and spend hours and hours and hours looking at a screen by ourselves. It's a little bit of a solitary kind of thing. And so there's a part of me that very badly wants my books to be out in the world, but very badly doesn't want myself to be out in the world. And so there's a lot of wanting to throw up with this and a lot of self-doubt. Like almost no matter how many times somebody I know tells me like, "Oh, that's pretty good." Like you worry the minute you're anywhere. And it's a gift, I guess, if anybody reads it at this point. But it is painful on some level to contemplate like it all going sideways and just everyone thinking it's terrible. So I totally feel that. I think there are times I'll get a bad review and I think that's fair. There are times I get them and I think, did you read my book at all? And then there are times they'll catch something and I'm like, that's so stupid. How did I miss that? Like the whole I am Miami thing. How did I ever miss that? Those are the ones that are really painful because you feel like you could have done better if you'd just been more thoughtful. But I don't know. The English language is so tricky. It's amazing how many ways you can get it wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have been that person that misses a letter in something I've seen over and over and over again because you've seen it over and over and over again. Your brain's like, well, I spelled this right. There's no way I got it wrong, but you did. You know, crazy.
You totally did. I mean, honest to God, there's there's a totally unnecessary throwaway one-liner in Twist of Cain about, I think it's like in chapter one. And it's just a cute little nothing joke. Um, I think I've rewritten that 200 times just to get it to land right. And like you go over it and over and over, you're like, and at a certain point you're like, should I just delete this? Like, why am I so hung up on this? Like, is this good? Is this bad? Like, what's going on here? Why am I so stuck on it? And I'm sure most people would never even notice it. But like, it's just strange how that works. That at least for me, I don't know how it is for other folks. I get really hung up on particular things and I just go at them.
Interesting. But no, I absolutely get it. So horror is what you're writing in. Is there a genre that you look at and think, I'm not doing it, but if you ever got the chance to write something successful in it that you would want to do, even if it's not horror related? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, right? Like, I'm enough of a nerd that I've read up on this whole publishing thing, right? And the model these days is you come up with an idea and you write 6 books about it, and then you move on to the next idea and you write 6 or 7 books about it, right? And you build up this whole thing. Like you're not supposed to be switching genres and playing around with stuff. And while I do tend to really enjoy fantasy and like the more I sort of lean into horror, the more I like it. Like it's funny because I don't think of this stuff as scary. Like other people read it and they're like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird. And I'm like, man, what's wrong with me that I didn't think that? But I've dabbled a little
Horror
bit.
is subjective.
What's that? Horror is totally subjective. Like it's funny to me. Some of the criticisms of Twist of Cain are that it's not that scary, but it definitely sits in that horror vein. And then if I break it down and I'm like, well, but this scene is like if this really happened to you in real life, like it might not be like a 7 foot tall monster like dragging you into the grave or something, but it's definitely upsetting. And it's all about like I think empathy and what matters to you, what scares you on some level. So to get back to your question about genre, if I had an idea for it, I'd probably do it. Like at one point, my wife and my friend, a friend of mine, we tried to write romance novels, and it was sort of fun. Like I'd never really tried it, and I have like half of a romance novel laying around. And sometimes I think I should go back and finish that, and see what would happen. But I don't know if that's really a genre that like I'm super excited about. And weirdly, as much as I love science fiction, thus far I've not felt like a super compulsion to go in that direction. And so like it's kind of weird that I sit down at my keyboard and I start writing and these are the things that come out, even though I like all this other stuff too.
No, I mean, I wouldn't want to try to write something in another genre if it was just kind of this is what I'm writing because it's what your mind wants to do. And honestly, why put pressure on yourself to do something else that's going to turn into like a job feeling versus this is just coming out feeling, which I think you can tell in some books. Was this something that they were kind of pressured into writing because of something, or is this something they truly wanted to write? And I love to read books by people that were excited about what they were writing about, you know?
Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, if there's any upside to the fact that this is not how I make my living, it's that every one of my books is a passion project. It's some weird idea that got stuck in my head that I had to do this thing to get rid of. Like my little novella, The Bower Ranch, was all about, I don't know, I was washing dishes during the pandemic and listening to some podcast. And I want to say it was on the origins of the word zombie, which I'd never actually considered before. And it was this really cool podcast. Oh, I know what it was. It was like a Halloween themed podcast about the origins of like words in Halloween that you never think about. And
Ooh,
so they
okay.
went into the whole origin of zombie, which is from, I'm going to get this wrong, but I want to say it's from Haiti. And it all has to do with slavery. And it's super depressing. And the podcast would do a much better job explaining it. But it got me thinking about, it got me thinking about work and like how interesting there is this relationship between like freedom and work and like how much freedom you're willing to give up to make a living, right? And like on the extreme side, right, there's this example of like human bondage, which is terrible, right? Like you have no freedom or autonomy and all you do is work, right? And fortunately, very few of us or any of us have to exist in that space anymore. But the Bower Ranch turns into this weird Western about this guy basically back from the dead who has no choice but to do things against his will. And when I finished it, I was like, oh, damn, I think I'm writing about work. That's not good. But it really hadn't occurred to me until I finished. But it's like a passion project, right? Like I had to get that out of me, and then I was okay with it, and I was able to move on. So,
That's actually a good thing. You're turning something that otherwise might have set and festered into something more productive, and you're doing something creative with it.
yeah, I think it's like I'm sort of becoming my own therapist here, which is a little weird. And sometimes I know what I'm working on, and sometimes the book will come out and people will come up to me and be like, "Wow, I can really see the theme of X in that." And I'll be like, "Oh, whoa, that is what's in there." Like I had no idea. And so that's the other part about what's like when Twist of Cain comes out in like a week and a half, I think I know what it's about, but I'm really waiting for people to read it and come up to me and be like, "Hey, really glad you could share X about yourself." And I'll be like, "Oh, I had no idea I was doing that," you know?
That's
So,
interesting because as somebody that writes a lot of reviews, I don't tend to read reviews until after I've read whatever I'm reading, unless I've seen it out in the wild, or I've wrote my review first. But like I'll write my review, get done with it, and then I'll, gander around, and I see so many people that read the same book as me and picked out something so different, and I'm like, oh, you know what? That was in that book, and I'm like, I didn't see that, and then they didn't see my. It's just so crazy.
yeah, but that's what's great about books. Like we all have these weird that books are a combination of whatever the person put in front of you and you. And when those two things collide, you get an experience that's 100% unique to you, right? And it's very unlikely, like you may run into people who like it for similar reasons, but none of them had the same experience you did. Like my favorite part of, so I have like this weird relationship with Stephen King. I feel like if I ever met the man, and I never will, I owe him like a huge apology because I absolutely hated his books when I was a teenager. And like the more I read them now, I kind of get it, which I didn't get it then. And so I read his book on writing. And I want to say, like, right in the beginning, if you haven't read it, like, he has this whole thing about how writing is like, it's actually magic. And he's like, look, I'm putting my words in your head right now. And I was like, whoa, friend, that's super weird. You really are putting your words in my head right now. And that's kind of a powerful thing, right? Like, I don't know. I think it's kind of fun. What else? I mean, I guess movies kind of do that. Um, and like really good TV can do that, but books are such a weirdly solitary thing. Like you're inventing everything, the sound of people's voices, what people look like. The whole thing is like a creation of you and someone else.
I don't know. It's like reading the word takes it all the way into your brain versus just seeing it on a screen, and it does still feel a lot different. But it's fine. So tell us a little bit about Twist of Cain that's coming out, of course.
Sure. So I should probably have a better elevator pitch. Twist of Cain is the story of Chris Beckwith, who's a teenager whose life really sucks, and he's going through a tough time. And in addition to his parents probably getting a divorce or at least breaking up, he finds out that an old friend of his so he's a high school kid, he's 15. He finds out that an old friend of his from elementary school has died, has committed suicide. And so he's really like bummed out about this, mostly because he hasn't really had like a good friendship with this guy for a long time. They sort of know each other, they still go to the same school and they sort of bump into each other, but they're not like who they used to be. And it gets him sort of dwelling on um like how does that happen? Like how are you like basically almost a brother to somebody and then you're not? And so as he's dwelling on this, all the popular kids at school start turning his friend Donnie into an urban myth that when he died, he left this creepy mixtape and everyone's talking about what's on it and everybody wants to hear it, but nobody knows how to get it. And so then one kid at school says he's got it and he's going to play it at this huge house party during spring break. And so Chris decides, no way in hell. Like, I'm going to do one last solid for my friend and keep this tape from getting played because, I don't want him to turn into a sewer alligator, basically. And what ensues is that he discovers an awful lot about what his friend has been up to, none of it good, since he stopped hanging out with him, and the fact that this tape is a lot more than he thinks it is, and people who listen to it, really bad things happen to them. And so he begins to understand that if it is played at this house party, really bad things are going to happen to a lot of people. So that's the basic plot.
So I am obsessed with that type of situation. When I was younger, slash creepy pastas, urban legends, the records that if they played and you heard them, you either went insane or things like that. So as soon as I saw the little blurb synopsis, loved it. But where did you kind of come up with that idea, the inspiration for the whole book together? Because it's kind of heavy.
Yeah, so it started with my friend Benjamin Chandler was always sending me these open calls. And it came from this open call. I want to say it was called like Pizza and Poltergeists, like horror stories of the 80s. And it was this anthology that wanted like heavily 80s themed horror stories. And so I kind of knew like they're probably looking for all the usual tropes, like, Pac-Man and Rubik's Cubes and like all this crap. And so I couldn't think of anything um to write about. And I only had like 30 days to come up with something. And so I was literally in the middle of texting him, like, hey man, I got nothing for this. Good luck and Godspeed, whatever it is you're doing. When it popped into my head that it would be really cool if someone had a Walkman that like possessed them. Because for me, as a child of the 80s, there was very few things as 80s as the Walkman. Like it really was like the key piece of technology that changed everything about everything. And from there, just all these ideas sort of spiraled into place. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole on that. And one of the things I loved were these old crazy urban myths. Like I can't tell you how many people would tell me about seeing the Faces of Death videos, right? And like I didn't know where to get a Faces of Death video. And then like you hear like your friend's older sister's cousin has a copy and it's like three times dubbed onto a VHS and like someone's going to have it at their house. And you're like, well, damn, I got to go to this party because I got to go
It's
see
it,
Faces of
it
Death.
gets in your head. You have to.
Right. And it's funny having kids now, there isn't as much of that mass media culture. They all have their own sort of little lanes that they live in and little universes. And within them, there's popular things that happen. But like, it's really hard for them to understand when you say to them, like, my kids will make jokes about Michael Jackson all the time. And I'm like, that's cool. That's fair. He was a really weird dude. But you have to understand there was a time when everybody had his record. Everybody. Like, I remember one Christmas, I got it three times. I got three copies of that record. And it's like it's a pretty good record, but who would buy three copies of anything anymore? And so like I wanted to capture that in this book, this feeling of like I can't miss this thing and how everybody does this weird groupthink thing towards that object. And so I mean hopefully I pulled it off.
No, and I always think the same thing. Again, I'm a huge cursed objects person. Like I'm obsessed with the idea of like an object and it having everything. Anyway, but like it every time something ends up like that, it's like a spooked object, a camera, whatever. It always blows my mind how many people are like, "Oh, let me use it," and I'm like, "Why?"
Right. Why would you do
After
that? Right.
bust it up. But no, in this story, it's just like, okay, like everybody's so obsessed with listening to this and hearing this, and I'm like, are you not just slightly concerned this is real? You know what I mean? It's crazy.
But
But
like
I'm
that was a
obsessed with the
thing. Like
idea.
I don't know where it is now, but like in the 80s, like the Ouija board was the thing. Like people were into this. And I remember people would say, hey, I had a really bad experience with this. It was super creepy and bad. And then everybody'd be like, we got to do that. And I was always the one who was like, Godspeed and God bless, I'm out. Have a good
Okay,
time.
let me know Monday at school if that worked out for y'all. But it's just
And
why?
I'm telling you, I've got like three separate stories that are all like almost like a chain of events where like one guy would be like, this was terrible, don't do it. Everybody would do it. And then they would be like, oh, we had a really terrible time too. And then somebody else would be like, really? I've got to try that. And it was like just this weird group thing. Like people had to check it out. So I felt like that felt pretty valid. And I'm sure, again, stuff like that probably still happens now. But like it just felt like a real thing back then. And the best part about this, about like having total blinders, is it wasn't until one of the ARC reviewers wrote that for that person, Twist of Cain felt like what if The Ring had been made by John Hughes? And I thought, oh my God, I love The Ring. How did I never, in all the years I've been working on this, it never crossed my mind that it's not exactly the same, but the cursed object thing is a genre unto itself. And so
It's
I
like
just,
an obsession with people, I think. And I think the reason it is an obsession is because it's something that could so easily happen. Because we see odd items that aren't cursed that we get obsessed with every day. So this is an alluring cursed object. Sign me up. And that
yeah,
makes
well,
it horrifying.
it's like there's nothing worse than the button that says don't touch, right? Like everybody wants to touch the don't touch button.
No, absolutely. That leads me to semi-ask slash how did you come up with the cover? Because I really liked like the color combo and the wrap that I've seen of your cover so far. It's something about it just makes it pop and it fits with the story. I don't know. I liked it a lot.
So I have a whole thing. I was talking to one of my friends about this, and I wrote him this whole email about it. And it's a couple of things. I got so the book, in addition to having, how should I put this? This is going to sound really pretentious, so I apologize to all of your viewers. But like one of the things I love about Quentin Tarantino is when I first saw his stuff, it seemed so incredibly original to me. It like blew my mind. And the more I've learned about film, the more I understand, and this is true of all film and music, people everything they do is built on the shoulders of the people before them. But his stuff in particular feels like this mass media collage. It's just this like mashing up of all these crazy things. And so Twist of Cain has some of that too, both music and movies. I put a bunch of movie stuff in there. And one of the movies I dropped in there is this movie Shock Corridor, which is this who's the guy who made that movie? He's this famous director from the 60s. He has like an eye patch and a cigar. I'll think of it later. But that movie's pretty nuts. And it has really cool posters because like in the 60s, like a lot of these movies wouldn't all come out at once. They would almost be on like traveling circuits. So they would go from town to town to town. And so the poster had to like grab your attention because Shock Corridor was only in your town for like 2 weeks and then it was moving on to wherever. And I really liked the posters and they kind of have this real stark color palette. They're like all white, black, and yellow, and everybody's in it is real zip toned, and it's a lot of people like screaming because it's all about. If you're not familiar with the movie, the basic premise is this reporter decides he's going to totally win the Pulitzer if he can just get himself institutionalized and write about this murder that happened inside a mental institution. And so, of course, none of it works out well, right? Like imprisoning yourself, convincing people you're crazy and being institutionalized is generally it's not a good idea, right? So anyhow, the poster has lots of people screaming on it, and they're all kind of zip-toned, and it adds like this weird like quality. Somehow it makes them seem more distressed because they're like somehow less material. And I liked the limited color palette. So I got thinking it would be really cool to do that. And so I started kind of hunting around and trying to figure out how to get um, like a picture or a photo that worked. And I really wanted the headphones thing to be in there. And I sort of came across this photo. And this photo, I altered it a bunch so that it's not like it was a stock thing that I changed around. Um, and so I added that kind of zipatone effect. And then I was playing around with different duotone color palettes. And I fell into this like purple blue one. And I was like, oh, this works for a couple of reasons for me. Because in the book, Chris talks a lot about how he and Donnie would hang out in Donnie's basement listening to music. And one of the things I used to love about the 70s and the 80s were all these black light posters. And you put the black light on and they would totally change. And so when I
Yes.
saw the blue, I thought, oh, this is cool. This is like a moment I could imagine Chris is sitting across from Donnie in his basement and he's blue because the black light is on. And if you look at the face, it's hard to know exactly what he's thinking. Like it doesn't seem great, but you're not really sure. And I like that ambiguity. Like I can imagine like I'm Chris and I'm staring at Donnie in the dark in the basement and he's leaning forward and he's blue like that. And you're like, what does this guy really want from me? And so I really liked that a lot. And then I was thinking about there's this old Dean Koontz book called Intensity, and I've never actually read it, but if you know the book, you've seen it because the cover is so bananas. It's just these like crazy orange and yellow colors, and like no matter where you go, you look at it. So I thought rather than leaning into dark colors, it would be really interesting to go bright. And so I kind of picked the orange to contrast with the blue, and then the type is almost identical to the type on Black Sabbath's Volume 4. which I thought was kind of fitting too, because if you've read the book, you know Donnie and Chris get into it a lot about Ozzy and Black Sabbath and all that stuff. So I thought that was kind of fitting as well.
It is. And I read the synopsis on the book, knew what it was about, and I really, really, really liked the cover. And I like colors, I like simple stuff sometimes and everything, but I couldn't really figure out what it was that I liked about it. But after hearing you talk about it, that cover fits the book so well, like the different things. Because when I looked at it, it does remind me of a black light and how the image will pop off of a poster, kind of, without the black light part. So that's genius.
Thank you. There are a lot of failed versions of this where it was not that. And so like, you try and you try and you try and I'm glad people like it.
And it catches your eye. I see it scrolling when I'm scrolling through. So I definitely think that was a good choice for that too as well. How excited are you for it to come out? What is it? How many days is it again?
About 10. I think it's the 7th of April, so 7, 8 days. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm very lucky here in Chicago that so my wife is a musician, and in her circle of friends, there are a lot of other people who are artists and whatnot. And I'm very fortunate that when I'm out at one of her shows, it's a very lovely community of talented folks who are very supportive of one another. And so everyone knows this is coming out. And so it's been fun to have them walk up to me and be like, "Oh, I can't wait to read it." Um, in real life, I think for a lot of folks who don't have that, um, and you're putting a book out in the world, it's a bit more of the void, and you just have no idea. So it's nice for me to know there are likely a few people who are going to pick it up on day one, and they will tell me, well, for better or worse, they're going to tell me to my face what they think of it. So,
That's such a cool thing, but also I would be so anxious about it, of course, but it's so cool to be able to actually get that feedback because of course how many books get read and there's never any reviews, and it's not because they didn't like it, they just didn't do a review and you don't hear
mhm.
about it. But this way you actually know some people that are going to read it, and you're going to hear one way or another that hey, this is good, this is it's kind of interesting.
Well, and so she's sort of in the whole folk rock Americana scene. So there's a lot of people who are singers and songwriters who I really admire. Like I think they write really great stuff. And so when somebody like that reads your book and says to you, "I really enjoyed this," like it kind of means a ton to me because like I admire what they do, right? Like and I marvel at it. Like songwriting to me is like I get to spend 5 years perfecting exactly what I want on the page and then I put it out. Like, and I know songwriters can spend a long time on a song, but oftentimes they're doing the work in front of you. Like they're singing a song and they're seeing what the reaction is, and they may revise the lyrics, they may do something else, they may change the tempo. I mean, talk about like brave. Like you got to get up in front of a room full of people, do your thing, especially if it's new. No one in the room has heard it. Nobody has any, like they may not even like it. And then you just do it. So it's pretty cool being around folks like that. Um, and hopefully they'll enjoy this book.
That is very cool. And it's just so interesting to see the little community type situation. And speaking of that, have you thought about going to events now that Twist of Cain's coming out? There's like this that you want to go visit, set up at maybe in the future, or are you okay just kind of doing the not so event track?
So I decided I was sort of lucky in that a little over a year ago, I ran across this book fair called Spooky Frog. I don't know if you've heard of the Spooky Frog folks. And see if you have, you know what a wonderful community that is. And since they're just up the road in Milwaukee, and I'm from there, so it's easy for me to visit family while I'm there. I decided to go to one, and it was such a wonderful experience. Not only meeting the writers that are in the room, but also all the other interesting artists and craftspeople, and just it's such an interesting community of folks. And I didn't go all by myself. I took a friend of mine who was an artist, and we shared a table, and it was just great because I was sort of terrified. Like, would nobody buy my stuff? Would people be like, this is terrible or whatever. Like it's very hard to put yourself out there in that way. But to have people like come up and like buy all three of your books because they're just readers and they're just like, I'm gonna try this out. Like, how cool is that? to just have a community of folks who are willing to try people they've never heard of before. It doesn't happen a lot.
You picked such a good event organization to go with too. Knocked it out. I'm so glad that like you got to have such a good time with them too. I watched their events and everything like that, and I'm like, this is something that is so cool. It's bringing together so many people, and they really put the effort into it.
They do, and it's really cool how they try and keep the prices down for folks to be part of it, and all the way around, from the people who attend to those of us who are vendors. Like, if I'm being honest, I'm going to dunk on Chicago here for a minute. The Chicago book stuff, the front end to get in those rooms is so high that you really have to be sure you're going to sell a lot of books. And Spooky Frog really makes it possible for indie folks to come out, meet people, talk to them, build a community, and be a part of that in a way that it's just very hard economically in Chicago to pull off, apparently, because most of the stuff I've looked at here, it costs at least 3 times from an author point of view to walk in the door, and it still sells out. So, I mean, good for them, but not good for me. So
Oh.
super glad I've got a place like Spooky Frog. Honestly, I wish they could run that all over the place because there are communities of folks just like that everywhere, and they should have
Not
this experience.
everybody is an author that's made it and is got bankroll, doesn't have to have another job and stuff like that. And I don't think many people realize that and think that every author, that's all they're doing and they've got money to go. You know what I mean?
Right, totally. I mean, in some ways, the tools to put out to self-publish your own stuff have never been cheaper and more available, but it's not the making the thing, it's getting anyone to notice it. That's the hard part. And that gets harder and harder all the time to like break through. So creating a space where like I may be going to this because I'm into something unrelated, and then it's so well curated. Like everything there goes together so well. It's just wonderful. Like you don't feel like you're an odd duck or anything. It's great.
That's I love that. And I hope you get to go to more of those as well, because again, I love seeing Samantha post about all of her events that are going on and what she's doing. And I run into a bunch of authors that I didn't know about just from her posts. I'm like, more books for me.
Honest to God, like there's a pull quote on the cover of Twist of Cain, um, from W.D. Gagliani, who writes the Nick Lupo series and a bunch of other stuff. I got that pull quote because I've met him at Spooky Frog, and I read his book and I loved it, and I was able to go up to him and say, "Man, I really love your book." And then we had like a whole conversation, and he was so nice. He was totally willing to read this and support what I'm doing, and that's a great example of community. Um, so I just think that's so important. Like any art type of art, whether it's music or visual arts or writing, needs a community to support it. We needed to get feedback from one another to support one another. None of this is easy, and all of it's kind of scary. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
knowing that there are people who are willing to, you know, encourage you is really, really helpful.
It is. Definitely. And that's one of the things I love about the smaller parts of the horror community is there's these little pockets where they're reaching out to help other little pockets, and you end up with this little network that goes across so many areas, and it's something fun to see.
Well, and it's fun to have Samantha does the Spooky Frog podcast now too, which is super fun because that's like a mass media version of it. So if folks haven't checked out the Spooky Frog podcast, it's pretty fun. They talk about movies and books and various other things, but it's like a little slice of the Spooky Frog experience, brought to you to wherever you are.
Yes. So everybody else can experience that too.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really lucky.
Let's see. Oh, okay. So I know Twist of Cain is coming out soon. Are you already working on something else after that? Or are you just like, got to get this book out and up before I even start thinking about that?
I am. I tend to. So this is another thing I need to apologize to Stephen King for someday because he's right. I should never have dunked on him so hard as a teenager. He recommends in his book that you always work on at least 2 things at once because while something else is being edited or whatever, it also gives you space. You stick it in the drawer for 6 months and forget about it and come back and it's fresh. So I tend to do that. I work on multiple things. And so I do have about 80% of the next thing done. I'm hoping to really finish it off this year and then give it to an editor, and maybe a year and a half from now I'll have it out. So
That is exciting.
yeah, I'm close. I mean, if I was smart, like I said, I would have a sequel to Twist of Cain ready to go, but I don't. The next book has nothing to do with this, which isn't to say I wouldn't do another one. Like it's funny, as soon as I finish these things, there's a part of you that's like, oh, I'm done with that. But then like you start thinking of like, I really have for almost everything I've done, I could totally think of another book in that series. It's just a question of time.
Ooh. I bet that would be hard because I know from a reading standpoint, sometimes when I finish reading a book, I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't want to read a different type of book. I want to read another book that's similar to this one, but time again, do you have time to go read it? You want something else? It would be so hard.
Well, and if it's good, there's always the fear that you're going to make the bad sequel. Like nobody wants to be the RoboCop 2, the Highlander 2. Like nobody wants that.
No, don't ruin this good thing that you just made so well. But that is a fear to have, or to put all that time into it and then you look at it and you realize it is that.
Exactly. So, yeah, I do have the next thing um pretty much well worked out. It's a weird book. Um I mean, I
Ooh.
can tell you the basic premise. It's all about Harry Houdini, and it's all about World War One, and it comes from another one of these goofy um open calls. It was an open call for a time travel story that involved three celebrities. And so, thank God I couldn't do my original idea because it was terrible. And I couldn't do it because I didn't realize that modern celebrities trademark themselves. So
Oh, I didn't
anybody,
think I knew that.
yeah, any celebrity after like the late 70s, you literally can't write about them because they are trademarked. And so this is going to sound terrible because it was terrible. My original idea, I can't even remember anymore, had something to do with Harry Houdini, Ulysses S. Grant, and Hulk Hogan. And it didn't work because Hulk Hogan is trademarked. And in fact, his trademark is extraordinarily complicated because Marvel Comics sued him over the Hulk part. And so for his entire career, I think he had to give up like 25 or 30% of all the merchandising revenue on anything Hulk Hogan related to Marvel Comics in order to get them not to sue him. So as soon as I read that, I was like, well, I can't do my
Ooh.
brilliant Ulysses S. Grant, Harry Houdini, Hulk Hogan story. So what I did instead is my book is all about, and you may be familiar with this, that Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had this crazy rivalry, right? And what's great about it is that Houdini is like the Fox Mulder, right? Like, oh no, he's more like the Scully, right? He's the Scully who, even though his full-time job is he's a magician, he's a total skeptic. And even though, right, Doyle's full-time job is being the man of reason, he's the guy that believes in fairies and all this other stuff. And so I thought it would be really fun if the two of them kind of came into conflict. And I came up with this idea that puts them kind of in the middle of the tail end of World War One. And I think it's pretty fun.
That sounds fun. I'm very excited for that. I love weird stuff like that. And I think I love the idea that you're pulling from like weird anthro callings that you had because I don't know how many times I'll run across an anthology and like the theme is something crazy and I'll read a short story in there and I'm like, man, why is this not a whole thing?
Well, or like in this case, I actually pitched this idea because they needed three people, and it turns out the third person in my story is Basil Rathbone, who is the actor who plays Sherlock Holmes later on. And it turns out that Rathbone was actually an incredible soldier. He was multiply decorated, like he fought really scary combat in World War One, and he's like legitimately a tough guy. And so I pitched back to them. I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to do this story about Harry Houdini, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Basil Rathbone. Like they all coexist at the same time in the same place. It's really weird." And they were like, "Oh no, we wanted people from different times. Like you can't have that." Like, and I'm like, "But this is actually a good idea." And they were like, "Nope." And so I was like, "Well,
Good.
forget it." And so I went off and did my own thing. But like the problem with those kinds of open calls is they can get so specific that if you write something for them and they don't take it, it's almost impossible to do anything else with it. So I feel sort of fortunate in some ways that they turned me down, and I didn't pursue my incredibly terrible Ulysses S. Grant, Harry Houdini, Hulk Hogan story.
That would have been an interesting story, though.
No, it would have been bad. There's just no way it wouldn't have been bad. I really don't know if I got hit on the head or why I thought that was the way to go. But
Listen, sometimes there's just things when it comes to short stories that you think will make it work that wouldn't work in a long story. Because if somebody told me that idea for like a whole novel, I would be like, mm-mm, don't think so. But like a short story, I could give a couple pages to that. You know what I mean? And it's interesting
well,
because
it
it's
definitely would have
weird.
been it wouldn't have looked like anything you read before, that's for sure. So,
Oh goodness. Let's see. Last question, I think. If you had to pass down some wisdom to somebody that's just starting out or wanting to write, what do you think it would be?
oh, that's a tough question. Because like I don't know if I really feel like I'm good enough at this to give anyone advice.
I think you are because you've already literally got a book that's coming out in like 7 days. So you've already gotten past the part of writing it, having somebody look at it, getting the cover done for it, and now you're doing it.
I mean, I think I would say, boy, that's a tough one. I mean, part of it is pick things you're passionate about. We talked about this a little bit, but it's got to be that. Like, I don't know how people. So there are some authors, and if Reddit is to be believed, who are very good at reading the market, and they go out there and they look and they say, "Oh, these things are selling, and there's like a niche here, and I'm going to fill that hole." And good for them. They're totally pros. But I can't do that because I need to be so extremely excited about the idea because it has to carry me through. So like be passionate about the thing and don't worry about, well, I mean, I don't want to say don't worry about the market, but I don't know if that's why I'm doing it. So maybe I'm not the best person to give advice on that, but I feel like passion matters. And then I would say, you know, read lots of weird stuff. Um, Strangely, I was a terrible high school student and I constantly didn't pay attention in English class. And so I always feel like, oh, I've never read the great books. And so sometimes I'll go back and I'll read one. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't read this. This was terrible. But every once in a while, I'll run across something where I'm like, wow, that was stupid. I should have read that. And weirdly, and this is going to sound, maybe this won't sound strange. I kind of got hung up on Hemingway, and I never would have thought I would like him for so many reasons. But it's not that I like what he's writing about, it's that I like how he's writing about it. And I learned a lot about economy and about not overwriting and about killing my darlings from reading his stuff. Um, I still think some of the things I'm still not sure Hemingway ever actually met a real woman in his entire life because he can't write them at all. But what he does do is remarkable, especially in short stories. And I would never have known that if I hadn't read more widely. Like if I just kind of stuck to my horror fiction or fantasy fiction. So sometimes it's okay to step out of your comfort zone and try a thing.
See, I think that's perfect advice. And I think even if you are going to be an author that's writing horror, you need to read other things because it's your book's more than just horror. You have to have the personable relationship. You have to build this character. You have to make people care about them. So you need to know more than just, oh, abstract terror. You know what I mean? So if you read
Right.
about them, watch about them, you can incorporate that into your writing and make it better.
And sometimes it's cool to see who influenced someone before them. Like I love Lovecraft. Like his stuff is totally cool. But it's neat that he was a fan of Ashton Clark Smith. And so I went and read his stuff and I'm like, oh, I like this better. Like don't tell H.P. Lovecraft. But the guy he liked, he was right. This guy's way better. And it's interesting. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't followed that thread. So sometimes it's kind of cool to just try stuff. Even if it's
Yeah.
really like an older book. Like there are writers from the 19th century that I think are just fantastically modern. I think Robert Louis Stevenson, like you go read Treasure Island, that book is fantastic. It could have come out yesterday. And or if you read The Count of Monte Cristo, that book is spectacular. But these are things I read later. I didn't read them as a high school student, and I'm glad I've read them now. I think it makes me better at what I do.
No, absolutely. And reading those books, I'm sure, helped you decide, hey, how is my author voice going to sound as well? Because if you were just reading in the same genre, same type of thing, I feel like your voice in your books wouldn't be as good, I think, necessarily, because you're not taking in more things, you're not taking in different aspects. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I'm not a big romance reader at all, but like, I think reading something that's romance related really helps when you're writing your book because you have to make your characters gel and want to interact together and make them real. And how do you do that if you haven't read books that focus on that, the big aspect of it? You know what I mean?
Hats off to Jane Austen, right? Like I've learned so much from reading some of her books, definitely from watching all the adaptations of her stuff. I don't think I could ever do that. It's not my jam. But to your point, I've learned an awful lot about like what it takes to believably make people think two characters who aren't real are real and are really falling in love. And like, I think that's a thing, whether you lean on it in a heavy way or a light way, it comes up a lot in fiction. And it's useful to know how that works.
No, absolutely. Because I hate reading a book where I love everything that's happening, but the characters are just, don't care about them, or I don't think they're real. So it takes away a lot from the book. But if you know how to make those characters sing together and draw you in, I think it adds another layer. And honestly, I think it makes horror books more horrifying because when the axe does fall or something bad does happen, you feel it much harder.
Right. In a way, that's what you want. Like if people are outraged that one of your characters died, you've done your job. It's when they're
Yeah,
just disposable that you haven't. And so like I do try to make my characters as three-dimensional as possible. And I hope that comes through.
absolutely. Well, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Thank you so, so much for talking to me, letting us inside your head about your books, your process, and everything like that.
I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about it. I'm really extremely grateful.